Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Lisa Bleich, and I am the president of College Bound Mentor, and I'm so thrilled to have everybody here today to talk about growth mindset and how it impacts college admissions. We're in a paradigm shift right now, both in terms of the world and, of course, college admissions. And so much has changed, and the only thing that's constant is that we're being bombarded every day in terms of classes going online, not being able to do the things that we expected to do. So many people are mourning the loss of opportunities and things that they thought they were going to be, and really having life as we thought we knew it is no longer the case. But as we move forward towards this, the only thing that we can do is really think about how can we approach this with a growth mindset, with an opportunity to think in a positive way of what we can do to manage the situation. So what I'd like to cover today, or what we're going to cover today, is we're going to talk about what is the growth mindset, why is it important, how does it impact college admissions, and then what can you do as students to think about this moving forward to demonstrate that you actually do have a growth mindset and that you can make a positive impact and continue to do things that are meaningful to you. So I'm really excited. We have an amazing group of panelists here, admissions panelists. And so I'm going to introduce, we have Victor Thomas from Washington University in St. Louis. We have Claudia Marroquin from Bowdoin College in Maine, Daniel Toglia from San Diego State, and Jan Suter from Vanderbilt University. So it would be great if each of you could introduce yourselves, give us a little bit of context of how long you've been in admissions, and perhaps give us a brief overview of your university and the types of students that really thrive in that environment. So Victor, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Victor Thomas. Again, I work at Washington University in St. Louis. I also happen to be a WashU alum, and I am originally I went to high school in New Jersey. So if you are joining us from New Jersey, welcome. I am excited to be talking to my hometown or home state folks. I have been at WashU in the admissions on and off a little bit since 2011. WashU is a medium-sized school when it comes to kind of the spectrum of college sizes. We have about 7,000 undergraduate students across 5 academic, we call them divisions. You can think of them as colleges or schools. We have a College of Arts and Sciences, the McKelvey School of Engineering, the Olin Business School, and then Colleges of Art and Architecture. What I think really characterizes students at WashU with that particular structure is that you have a lot of opportunity to cross over into other disciplines and combine ideas in interdisciplinary ways. So one type of student that would thrive at WashU is one that thinks in interdisciplinary ways or has multiple interests.
Great. Claudia?
Hi, so again, I'm Claudia Marroquin, director at Bowdoin, and I'm also a graduate of Bowdoin. I hail originally from Los Angeles, California, and I was the first in my family to go to college. And this August will actually mark the start of my 10th year working at Bowdoin. So I have seen the place evolve both as a student and now as an administrator for a number of years. But a few things about Bowdoin, because we are located in Maine, I think one thing that I would say is a constant between our students are their appreciation for community. We are a small residential college. Our entire enrollment is about 2,000 students, and we're located in a small town. So I think students really recognize that when they come to Bowdoin, they're coming not just for the amazing educational opportunities they're going to find on campus, but they want to be a part of something larger and really want to plant seeds in the area and to really be able to call Maine home. I would have never thought I would be living in Maine so many years after my graduation, but I think that really speaks to how students really try to take advantage of everything they're going to find during their time here. And the other piece too that really does blend into academics and what our students do outside of the classroom too is I think Bowdoin students really are risk takers. And coming from Los Angeles, people are always questioned. They're like, you're going to school in Maine? And there's always this tone that people have. And I think students who find Bowdoin attractive are totally confident with that ambiguity and being able to say, yeah, this is where I'm going, and are excited about the surprises they may have along the way, knowing that it's all going to be about growth and learning, and are comfortable stepping outside their comfort zones.
Thank you. Danielle.
Thanks for having me. So, interesting fun fact, I have worked now at the fourth institution, San Diego State University, in my career. I've never worked at a school that I have a degree from. I sort of kept my personal and professional life separate, but I've had some really wonderful, interesting experiences. I am very new to the university, although not to higher education. This is my, to date myself, I guess, almost 27th year working in higher ed. But I joined the staff here in April, having been at my previous institution for 20 years. So like many of you, I'm very new, I'm a newbie, and it's been an interesting learning curve, to say the least. San Diego State University, unlike my predecessors, is a public institution, part of the 23 campus system, the largest in the country. There are 23 California state institutions. San Diego is the second largest with almost 30,000 undergraduate students. So also the largest institution I have worked for. It really adds a sense of vibrancy to the campus. We are located in a beautiful neighborhood just northeast of downtown, very close to hiking trails, the beaches, the mountains. A little bit far from New Jersey, about a 5.5 hour flight, but nonetheless very close to the airport in terms of managing public transportation. And we do have a trolley that stops on campus, which I find quite interesting, so that students can get to things like their internship, obviously to athletic events in the city, to the zoo, to the mall, do some shopping. So it's very convenient in terms of moving around a larger campus like ours. The student population comes from all over the country, as you can imagine. It's a very diverse population. And we have 7 undergraduate schools of study. So students can study everything from arts and sciences to engineering, education, and business. So the 197 programs that we offer really allow students the ability to move across different academic programs and have the flexibility to combine their passions and their options. We are a Division I athletic institution as well. So if you're looking for that sort of large rah-rah feeling with very high student spirit, you would definitely find it at SDSU. So I encourage you to take a look at our website and do some more research. Thanks, Lisa.
Sure.
Thanks, Al.
Yeah. Jan, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Jan Suter, and I am a Senior Assistant Director at Vanderbilt University, which is located in Nashville, Tennessee. And I am broadcasting this evening from my dining room table in my apartment. I'm happy to be here with everyone, so thank you. Like Danielle, I've had a long career in higher education. Many years ago, I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland. I attended school, Bucknell University, small school in Pennsylvania. But over the 25 years in higher ed, I've worked at Penn State University, at Case Western Reserve, the law school, at NYU, specifically NYU Abu Dhabi. And now I've spent the past wonderful 9 years with Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is a mid-sized institution. We have just under 7,000 undergraduate students. We are located in the middle of the fabulous city of Nashville. So students who want a traditional, beautiful, walkable campus, but all the resources and the fun and the excitement of a very cool, interesting, quirky city, you've really got that. There is a focus on undergraduate teaching and learning. We do have on one campus our 4 undergraduate schools, but then we have several other graduate programs and a medical center. Make no mistake that I'm representing Vanderbilt University. And again, the focus is on undergraduate teaching and learning. We really talk about balance. So 50% of your Vanderbilt experience is going to be what you are doing outside of the classroom. We're going to talk about some of those many, many things today that our students do in high school and bring with them. And I will end on the note that for the past several years, Vanderbilt has been rated by a survey that the Princeton Review sends out as the number 1, 2, or 3 happiest students in all the land. And that's one of the few statistics I like to share, but I think it does say a lot about our student experience. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody. So let's talk a little bit about what is a growth mindset. This was actually a term that's been around for a while, but it was popularized by Dr. Carol Dweck in her book, Mindset. And so a growth mindset, as opposed to a fixed mindset, which is really binary, where somebody thinks of themselves in, one way or the other. I'm not good at math, or I'm not a good writer, or every summer I go to summer camp and that's how I spend my summers. There's this idea that when there's a challenge faced, it's hard to, there's almost like a stop sign to move forward. Whereas a growth mindset is where you take a challenge and you look at it as an opportunity to grow, to learn, to seek help from other people, and to move forward. And so just an example, I was working with a student last week and we were talking about summer plans, which I'm sure a lot of you are interested in. And he was saying, you know, I always go to summer camp and I was really looking forward to being a junior counsel this year, but likely that summer camp experience is not going to happen. So we started brainstorming some different ideas and he realized that, you know, he really likes economics. It was his favorite class this year. And he hasn't really had the opportunity to go that much deeper in things over the summer. So he ended up thinking, well, hey, I could start doing an economics class over the summer. I can go deeper in business or finance. And that's what he kind of shifted his mindset from this fixed one to like, hey, this is an opportunity to move forward. So it would be great if you guys could talk about some specific examples of how you see growth mindsets and in particular, how you use it to evaluate candidates. And why don't we start this time with Claudia?
Great, thank you. Yeah, we talk about growth mindset all the time, and I think most admissions officers have probably read the book as well. And I think for me, that one of the ways that I defined it, especially in the academic realm, is I think there's this notion around college admissions that we as officers are looking for students at their perfection, and that's what essentially how we're admitting students, that talent is it. But I think for many of us, we recognize that it's really hard work, and students who put in dedication and the effort behind it, those are the students who end up being the most successful on a college campus. And that's what we're looking for in the application process as well. That it's not just, again, this idea that this is what I've always done, or this is what I'm really good at. But as I mentioned a little bit about voting, like that risk-taking ability, that we're looking not only for students who recognize an opportunity, but who are really willing to put in the hours necessary to get better at something, or who are inquisitive enough that they're like, this feels really uncomfortable, but I'm intrigued by this idea, so I'm going to put in the time and effort to see this through. And that, I think, opens up a number of windows, not just for how you learn and the questions you ask, but even your own way of thinking and the reflection and what you might want to get out of a college experience, or any experience for that matter, is that you're not just looking at it from one angle, but really trying to, again, for lack of a better word, grow and learn from each of those moments. And that, I think, is really what admissions offices are looking for, to be able to nurture an individual and then to see them take advantage of opportunities and not just stick to what feels the most comfortable, because that would be easy. And college isn't meant to be easy. It's supposed to be this way of learning and growing from experiences.
Great. Danielle, you want to take it a little bit?
And I think that was wonderful. Thank you, Claudia, for sharing. You know, I think too that right, as admission representatives, our starting point only is sort of the brains and the talent right behind the student, who we all often quote, you know, can do the work, right? And that's always our quote. We have many applications from students who can do the work. It goes well above and beyond doing the work, right? That's sort of the fixed mindset. That's where it starts. But I think then thinking about the student's passion and resilience and the love of learning that comes through in the process. And that's where, again, there's great accomplishment. Because I think for the student who shows that resilience and that love of learning is really what we're looking for above and beyond that fixed brain and talent, you know, in the process. I know that's sometimes hard to convey, and we'll talk about that as we move through, you know, the application and admission process. But I think acknowledging, you know, that we want you to embrace your imperfections, right? I always talk about the essay and the writing sample in the fact that it's not writing about an extraordinary topic. It's writing about an ordinary topic extraordinarily. And I often think of, you know, my own sort of parental guidance, right, of my nephew who's a senior in high school, graduating and going to college this year. And of course, having difficulty with things like calculus in senior year and planning on being a finance major and what that means. And I try to encourage him to think about the fact, you know, that it's not getting the right answers all of the time, Aiden, right? It's obviously putting your mind to work. It's obviously thinking around the question. It's challenging yourself to continue to strive. So those are some things that, you know, I want to encourage students to think about in terms of the growth part of the mindset, right? Instead of the fix.
I love that. Thank you. How about you, Jan?
I think that sometimes students believe that there might be, when we talk about learning and growth mindsets, that there is one way to do this. There is a formula. There is a magic formula. And what is that? And so much of the truth about applying to college is about being yourself and being who you are, and realizing that when we challenge students to think about a growth mindset, it might look very, very different from what your friends will be doing. So you might be a student who has an interest in something like business or engineering, but you also have an interest in history and other things. And if you want to learn during the summer, and perhaps you're going to take online classes, we're not expecting you to have the same path as someone else, nor are we looking for high school students who are halfway to their careers. Most high school students are not. Some are, but I will tell you that most are not. And most students who start at Vanderbilt are not. So this is about being true to yourself and realizing, I think it's really important to be conscious of what the opposite of a growth mindset is. And I'm so glad that, Lisa, you mentioned it, because I actually Googled this afternoon to educate myself, because I am a lifelong learner. So the fixed mindset is static. And we're really looking for all of those ways, tiny, medium size, bigger, where you're showing kinesis, right? Where it's kinetic, it's active, it's changing and learning. And that is a challenge for all of us this summer and in the fall. So I will stop there.
All right, and Victor.
Yeah, I really like this topic. I was between a couple stints in the admissions office at WashU. I was a high school teacher for a little bit, and this was a topic that I would every year teach at the beginning of the school year. The difference between fixed and growth mindset. And I think that Claudia, Danielle, and Jan have done a really good job of explaining kind of like what that looks like for you as a high school senior. What I'll add is that there is actually science behind this, like there's research that shows that your brain is still developing these neural pathways and neurons that fire, and they are more active with people who lean toward kind of the growth mindset end of the spectrum. And so this, as Jan said, this is a lifelong learning opportunity that is just kickstarting for you as you are embarking on the college application journey. To kind of get back to your question, Lisa, about how this might come into play in the evaluation process, and I'm sure that there will be some follow-up questions, but one way that I thought about this is letters of recommendation, and how sometimes some of the most resonant and memorable letters of recommendation aren't from the teacher that you earned an A in their class, because that teacher who you might have really struggled in their class still knows a lot about how you approach that work, how you learn from that work. And perhaps there was, some growth in your actual grade. But I would encourage you to think about growth mindset in that way, that not everything has to be perfect or at kind of the finish line, right? There is room to grow, and in the application process, sometimes that's something that we can suss out of a letter of recommendation, that a student has experienced significant growth over the course of working with that teacher.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Thank you, Victor. So let's talk a little bit about why it's so important. I mean, can you give us some specific examples of how you've seen students? Maybe they might have been a student that you sussed that out in a letter of recommendation, or you might have taken a chance on them because they had that growth mindset, where they've been able to really contribute to the college community in a significant way. And if you could just give some examples, that would be great. And I guess we are going to start with Jan this time. Did I get that right?
Yeah, sure. That works for me. Thank you. Off the top of my head, some immediate examples from this past year of reading applications, are students who have experienced, let's just say they've had negative experiences through, bullying, for example, which is a terrible thing. We know that it happens in high schools. And I've read, so many applications where students are able to take that, hard as it is, and to turn it into a learning experience, sometimes by creating an organization. And I'm not suggesting that, again, there's not just one way to do this. I'm not telling everybody out there that you have to go out and create a bullying organization, but it's about, taking what's happening to you and processing it and externalizing it and saying, I want to educate. I want to turn other people into learners, and I'm going to affect other lives. So I read about that. I also read about students who might not have an immediate connection, but they've joined organizations to be allies, to support the LGBTQI communities, or to support other cultural communities at their schools. That's how you show a growth and an understanding, because we are looking for strong character. Getting out of your comfort zone and stretching is a part of a growth mindset. And so finding ways to change your communities and support other students through maybe organizations within your school, but also through your allyship and leadership with organizations outside of your school is something that we read about quite a bit.
Yeah, that's a really interesting answer. I was thinking actually about a former client of ours who did exactly that. He was the only male in the feminist group or the Women's Alliance at his high school. And he talked about exactly that, how he grew and how he learned and understood all of these issues that were facing his female classmates. And he was kind of wondering why he was in that club. He went because his girlfriend was part of it, of course. And then after he was there, he just had this completely different mindset and started impacting those same issues in student government and just making sure that everybody felt inclusive. So that's a really good example to give there, Jan. Thank you. Victor, I guess we're back around to you.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to think of a specific example. I think of a lot of examples from when I was a teacher, and I was a math teacher, and students, how are you supposed to know what the quadratic equation is before you are taught what it is? But those students who are open to learning about it and learning why things work, asking the question why, I think is parallel with having a growth mindset. Not just memorizing things, not just learning a formula, actually understanding how it functions. And the parallel that I can draw with the college admissions process is, and I just use the word process, I really try to avoid that because process is such a results-oriented way of thinking about this journey. And if the finish line is getting into the college that you want to, what a waste of an opportunity to learn about yourself throughout the experience and throughout the exploration that you and your family will do in terms of what do you want in a college, what maybe have you not even thought about that you would like. As I mentioned, I went to high school in New Jersey. I knew that I wanted something a little different than the East Coast, but I didn't know quite what yet. And so it took kind of this exploration of schools outside of my comfort zone, outside of what I was familiar with, for me to realize that there are so many opportunities at so many great places, represented, a few of them represented here, and without kind of letting myself go outside of that comfort zone, I wouldn't have ended up where I am now. So.
Claudia, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think the examples Victor and Jan have shared so far, I think are excellent and perfect. And the one thing I would add too is, I think growth mindset, when students are really actively pursuing it, it's also recognizing that there's something bigger than just you. And I think it goes back to what Victor was saying again, if the entire college search is just about the trophy at the end of the line, you've missed out on an opportunity to reflect. And the way that we're looking for students are that figuring out students that are recognizing those moments that are beyond them, and that they recognize the importance of interpersonal relationships, that the world isn't just about them, that there's going to be a greater impact. And I think that's especially necessary right now, where all of us are feeling the impact of the pandemic and the change and disruption to our life. We're all experiencing it at different levels though. And students who can recognize, like, yeah, there's something bigger than me here, and there's a moment where I can really act upon it. I may not know exactly what to do right now, but I have the inclination of trying to figure that out and asking why things are the way they are. That's really where I start to see like the road really diverging for students who are definitely in a growth mindset way of thinking, and those who, again, are fixed in their mode of operation and aren't necessarily seeing those opportunities that go beyond themselves.
Danielle, do you have anything to add to that?
I would just say, I think that for students that are fixed, they're seeing a finish line, and the finish line should always be moving, right? You should always be striving for a new finish line. And that's how I see sort of the growth process, right? In the growth mindset, is that the static is sort of firm, and the mindset should always be sort of striving for something new. Again, I think, in terms of, Jan put it perfectly in terms of her student who formed a group, to advocate. My favorite essay this year was from a young man who in his own home has a sibling who's autistic, and he took that difficulty and turned it into a strength and talked about it in his writing sample, in terms of then how he empowered other siblings of autistic young men and women to, again, to sort of embrace that, to not be embarrassed by that, to think about how that impacts life at home, life being away from home, moving into the college process. It was just really inspiring. And so I think examples like that of students who are taking the bull by the horns and taking advantage of their circumstances is empowering in terms of growth.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was thinking of another student. I was just meeting with him last week, and he is in an a cappella group at his high school. And he's not in a leadership role. He's only in 10th grade, but every year they do a concert that is a cappella for autism. And of course, the concert got canceled this year. And he happens to also have a family member, a brother who has autism. And so it was really personal to him to want to do this concert. And so we were talking about, well, what could you do? And his immediate response was, well, I'm not a leader. I'm not, I'm not in the, I'm not the president. I'm not there yet. And so I'm assuming that they're going to just do stuff. And I said, well, have you guys been practicing online? And as we started talking about it, he realized that, well, wait a second, I guess I can do something. So he reached out to the leadership in his a cappella group. He reached out to an alum who is in an a cappella group at Yale, and also has a family member. And so that's important with autism. So it's important to his cause. And then he reached out to all of the high schools that were also supposed to be in this concert. And now he's organizing this virtual concert, and he's trying to do a competition among everyone to figure out who can raise the most money for this. So it was just like turning on the switch to think that, yeah, this is something important, and it's not something that you want to let go by the wayside just because it got canceled. So I think that's really another good example of that. One of the things I think a lot of,
Can I add one thing? I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Crazy now, but I wanted to add one thing that just came to my mind while I was listening to everybody talk so eloquently about this. Because with the growth mindset, I think we very naturally gravitate toward, well, what do I like to do, and what am I good at, and how can I change the world with those things? but I would also like to challenge students to be bold and to think about what makes me uncomfortable.
Mm.
Because it's also very often when we are outside of our comfort zones, keeping in mind that all of us representing institutions of higher education are going to want you to feel supported, but we're also going to want you to feel challenged in a lot of different ways, because that is growth. Be bold and think about what makes me uncomfortable. What are the topics? Why does that make me uncomfortable? I need to know more about that, and I need to explore it. And is there some way for me to affect some kind of change? That's sort of maybe another way of looking at this.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Jen. So to that point, as you're thinking about yourselves and your role in admissions, I think everything that's going on right now in higher ed, or really the world, but we're talking about higher ed right now, I am imagining is making you uncomfortable in terms of how you're having to change your roles, how your institutions are having to pivot and change and react and come up with plans. So can you talk a little bit about how your role in both as an admissions officer and within the Office of Admissions, as well as your institutionals, I wouldn't say priorities, but what they're planning on doing for the fall, how they're pivoting and really just trying to move forward in these unprecedented times. If you could speak to that, that would be great. And I guess, does anyone want to start or with that?
I'll start.
Okay, great.
You know, thank you. This is interesting because obviously, as you can imagine, having joined staff, just had my month anniversary. Happy anniversary to me, I guess, right? Threw me into the pot. It's been quite interesting, again, in the comparison of previous private universities that I've worked at, much smaller, urban, diverse, being challenged, right? I feel like I, as a student and as an employee, being challenged by people that are like me, that are not like me, and then embracing, people that are, and learning sort of all of the nuances of just the college lingo and the talk, and as we begin a new career, and a change. But I think most importantly, at the essence, right, of who we are as educators is being a counselor. And all of us with our, experiences, if you added up our years of experience, have really, I think, in our roles, been an encourager, I hope, the last few weeks. That this is obviously something that's unprecedented and overwhelming, but it is temporary, we hope, and that we are moving in a direction of hope. And I think understanding that we're being as transparent as we can, I think that's helpful in this process, that universities are being transparent and they're sharing as much information as they have, at their disposal at the moment. Sometimes I think with larger universities like mine, and I'll share a little bit about a 30,000 student population and 23 campuses, our decisions come from a chancellor who actually makes decisions for 23 campuses, over 150,000 students at once. So it's not like making a decision for 2,000 students that might live on a college campus in a residential setting. And I think for that reason, it's been difficult for students who want answers immediately. Obviously, they want the right answer immediately, and trying to provide that information in the most transparent way has been difficult, I think, because we just don't have the answers. But I think we're doing our best in terms of, again, providing transparent information when we have it, being sure that we're communicating with families and students. That means prospective and current. I have a lot of current students that call me that find my information because I'm in New Jersey and we're neighbors, which is always nice. Great for customer service. But in terms of I think the access to information, it's difficult because it is delayed. And I think that puts that in and of itself puts students at a disadvantage because the information coming is slow. We were, I think, one of the first schools to announce that we would be virtual in the fall for the beginning of the fall semester. Again, that was a decision for 23 campuses, and then each campus has sort of their own of course, their own, president and determining what that means. But you can imagine that means changes in classroom sizes, in lab space, in residential options, and everything has a trickle effect. One mere, decision changes, 5 others. And so we're really trying to think about all of those steps as we'd be proactive in this approach, rather than trying to be reactive as we were this spring.
Claudia, sure.
Yeah, I'll just jump in to give the totally opposite, given the size difference, where I have described, again, the last 2.5 months, because that's about how long I think we've all been working from home now, as a roller coaster. And again, trying to find those moments of being positive, even though it's scary at times. But in the realm of trying to be positive, it's fascinating, again, how quickly all of our institutions have had to pivot. And I think for the longest pieces, like higher ed and institutions, because there's so much bureaucracy, and yes, we all have people that we're accountable to, tend to move at slower paces. And I have found this time to be quite energizing, in that decisions are happening quickly because they have to, and conversations that normally would take much longer to get to, the circumstances of the time that we're finding ourselves in, are leading to some really creative solutions and a lot of problem solving that normally would have taken maybe a year and a half, and it has to happen really quickly. But like Danielle, I think the hard part of this work too at the moment is that, yeah, we're used to being completely accessible and personal, to meet students on the road, to shaking hands, answering questions, connecting folks. And that's kind of been ripped from us. And we're trying to pivot and find ways to make the work that we love so much feel different, and using different mechanisms, but still trying to achieve the same outcomes. And I think that's a balance that all of us, regardless of the work we're doing, and especially though in higher ed, working with young people, I don't see students as much on Zoom, because it's just most of the webinars we do, it's us talking into a panel and not quite seeing students. So I think, again, I've been spending these last months trying to find the positives. I have also been on the task force. So again, higher ed, we love working groups and task forces. And I have been on the task force trying to think about all the different scenarios and options that that the fall could look like. And really, it's not just the fall, but really the entire upcoming academic year. Since it won't be a flip of the light switch in January, somehow things are going to be magically better. We can all hope, but I think setting the right expectations that we have not yet decided what will happen at Bowdoin. We're finalizing the report that will be sent to the president and the trustees, and then a decision will come. But I think the best part of like the last few weeks has just been seeing everyone really coming together and trying to find those silver linings, knowing that this is really hard and difficult on everyone, and especially not being able to give people an answer. Like Danielle was saying, we're used to that. We're used to having answers. And right now, the answer is we'll have something ready soon. And when we do, we'll communicate that. That just feels so different, but it is what we have to work with right now.
Yeah, no, it's very difficult to have an answer when there isn't an answer. And I think everyone's feeling that way. I'd love for Janet and Victor to also comment, but one of the questions that came up earlier was, in particular, as it relates to curriculum and curriculum and how that might change as it relates to sciences and to classes that typically have a lab associated with it. If either of you could speak to how you might do that in a virtual way, or if you've been thinking about those things, that would also be helpful. Thanks.
I will jump in, and Victor can also add. But universities and colleges are going to adopt a, wait for it, growth mindset, right? Yes, we are right there with you, students, and we miss you. We miss guidance counselors and students and independent educational consultants and our families very, very much. We miss seeing you a lot. So we have to engage in creativity and innovation and critical thinking, and there are going to be some mistakes that are made along the way. Last week I attended a town hall for Vanderbilt, which was really informative. And there was a slide that had 15 different ways of delivering learning. So as Claudia and others have said, it's not going to be flipping a switch and it's going to be the way that it was, or everything's going to be online, especially for institutions like Vanderbilt and WashU that are residential, and Bowdoin probably also, and I'm sure that San Diego State has some folks living on campus too. All of this needs to be figured out. And I think that our institutions are trying to figure it out in a matter of months, when if you told us this was happening and you have to plan for it, it would have taken years. So 15 different ways of delivering learning. I think that things are going to be a hybrid of all kinds of things. I've sort of speculated, not as a Vanderbilt representative, but as Jan, the human being, maybe there'll be more classes held on the weekends. I don't know, don't quote me. Don't write to our chancellor and say that, but it's going to be something like that, because safety and health of our population, whom we miss so much, is really, really important. I'm very glad that I am actually a small cog in the big, beautiful place that Vanderbilt is, so I'm not being consulted about some of these academic decisions. But overall, publicly, Vanderbilt has a website that is entitled Return to Campus. That's what we are working toward, because that is our model for all of us. We want to see you on campus. That's what I'm going to say. And Victor, any?
Yeah, I think that what Jan is kind of describing as this iterative process of learning, that we're not going to have all the answers right away, and we are going to learn as we roll out new options and ways of teaching science classes and ways of streaming science experiments over YouTube or whatever it is. And I think I compare that to how admissions offices kind of embody a growth mindset every year when we do what's called file reader training, when we are training our staff around reading applications. And we do this every year. Admissions offices do this every year, not only to just refresh the policies and the processes that our application kind of flows necessitate, but also to learn new things about what's coming from students, right? Jan used an acronym earlier in this webinar, LGBTQIA. When I started in admissions, which was not much more than almost 10 years ago, not that long ago, the QIA part wasn't even really part of the convention of that particular acronym, and it has taken a few years to catch on, but that's what growth is, and that's what learning is. And so it is important that that not only are we trying to provide that experience for you to learn as students, but we are also trying to learn about you in the process and learn how to, another kind of a sillier example to kind of get to, I think, what Claudia was saying about how we've had to pivot, is I have never promoted social media to students more than I have the past couple of weeks, because that is one of the ways that we are really finding that students are engaging with us. And so, we've always had an Instagram account and a Facebook page, but we have a TikTok account now, right? Like we didn't have that before. And now because of the circumstances, we have to learn how to utilize these new platforms. And I think that is reflective of us as offices and institutions, really trying to grow ourselves as well, not just create a place for you to grow, but to grow ourselves.
Yeah, I was going to say, everybody who knows me knows I always say I don't tweet, don't go to my Twitter. There's probably nothing there. I'm barely on LinkedIn, I have a Facebook account, and now of course I have everything. I have a Snapchat and an TikTok, because I'm following, 16, 17, 18-year-old students, and they're following me. But I think that's our growth mindset, at least at my age. I think, learning sort of all of these, new modes between Hangouts and meetings and WebEx and Zoom and, and really keeping ourselves organized in terms of a new way, of meeting, virtually. Definitely being pushed in that growth mindset.
That's great. So can we expect a TikTok dance-off soon? Or competition might be a way to gain entry into WashU, who knows? If you could talk a little bit about how can students develop this and demonstrate this for you? And how, because, in particular as it comes to summer, because that's what's on everybody's mind right now, there's lots of online classes. Some are some are expensive and, pre-college programs. Some are free classes or very nominal expense. How would you recommend that students develop this growth mindset, demonstrate it to you, and how you will be evaluating those various things that they do over the summer?
I can offer a thought, and I guess I'm sort of piggybacking off of what I said earlier, but I was going to suggest off the top of my head that students look in their immediate communities, because there are ways to help, there are ways to assist people. Lots of help is needed right now, and it could be, socially distanced, mask wearing opportunities. I do know students who have they've done this, before we had this pandemic, but they had created, I'm thinking of stores, or they had done some kind of community service organizations that they created or gotten involved with, which are virtual. It is possible to do that. Perhaps you're someone who likes to work with children. I had an email the other day from a young woman who really wants to go into education, and she was concerned because she didn't have any teaching experience. And I wrote back and I said, yeah, most of our students who apply to our teaching majors, they also don't have any teaching experience. We don't expect you to come halfway toward your career, but there have got to be, online tutoring, mentoring experiences. I'm talking very specifically about education. But I do know students who have reached out virtually. They have partnered with schools, with other community organizations, and now more than ever, looking at the ways that you can possibly connect online to lend a hand. I think that's going to be a way to take this and sort of turn lemons into lemonade a little bit this summer.
Mm-hmm. I live in a very small community, as Lisa knows, we're neighbors practically. 6,000 people or so. It's quite small, so everybody knows each other and knows the community well. And I have lots of students that will look for different service opportunities during the academic year, but I think they fail to think about these times. And we have actually all of our local communities and towns, our little cafes and shops that are through donations, for example, delivering food to the elderly in the community. So it doesn't take much. You can walk most of the town. If you don't have a bicycle or a car to get around, you can use your feet. But delivering food, for example, to an elderly person who's homebound is a good example of what's happening, in my own community. We have throughout the town, we have a little sort of a library in front of different people's homes, so you can borrow a book, take the book out, bring it back, etc., with lots of Lysol wipes accompanying those libraries. But it's a good opportunity, I think, for people to continue a book club and to be able to read the same book and discuss it if that's where they're an avid reader and their love of writing and reading comes from. We've had other students that do that pick up throughout the town. So again, fully gloved and really careful, but we want to make sure that our streets are continuing to be clean and people are picking up after themselves and things of that nature. So we've had a little a little group that's done that. So we've still continued, I think, to maintain lots of different ways to volunteer. And we're doing those closer to home, which I think is wonderful. You know, we're doing them within our own community. You don't need to travel 12,000 miles to, you know, to take a Spanish course or to teach Spanish. You can do that right in your own community. We have a Spanish speaking church in town, for example, where lots of our students are tutoring virtually now, especially, you know, as a population as ours, where we have an adult community who's much, you know, second language is English. So there's lots of ways for you to get involved in your own community really close to home, which is quite nice.
Well, we have about 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we get to questions. So I'm going to turn this over to Abby. And I think just one point that everybody has brought up is just to approach this time as an opportunity and to look at it with a positive mindset and just think about interesting things that you can do. So I'm going to turn this over to Abby, who's going to ask some questions.
Hi, everyone. Okay, I think there is an overwhelming interest in hearing about summer. So I wanted to let Claudia and Victor maybe talk about that, but I'll just say what we're telling students is to really just think about this summer as you always would. Pursue something that's meaningful to you. And maybe circumstances have changed. Maybe your job went away, maybe your camp went away, maybe your soccer team went away. But there are other ways that you can participate in those things. And there are new to, I think it was Jan's point before, there are new adventures that you can explore. And just generally speaking, we're looking at things in a couple of different buckets. There's, well, recognizing that some students will have family responsibilities and they will be taking care of siblings because their parents don't have childcare, or they'll be taking care of elderly relatives, and just recognize that that is an incredibly valuable way to be spending your time. And then we look at possible activities in other buckets. So there's work. Some students will have to work. Some will want to work, and they're going to be traditional jobs that can be done safely. These are decisions for you and your family to make together, but working in restaurants, working in stores. Also, I think someone brought up tutoring. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for tutoring of middle school and elementary school kids this summer in different neighborhoods because of the way school ended. A lot of kids didn't have a great school experience, and their parents can be able to be looking for ways to prepare them for the fall. So teaching dance online. We have one client who used to teach dance at her studio. Now she's doing it virtually, and she has 3 times the number of students in a class. So she's making 3 times the amount of money, which is an unexpected benefit. So there's work. Also service, which everyone talked about, and thinking about stuff in your community is great. And I think, one of our panelists said it can be small things and big things. We have one client who is an artist, and she's painting rocks, like beautiful little messages on rocks, and putting them all over her neighborhood for people to find. We have another artist who is offering her services, designing logos for emerging community service organizations. So there's small and big things that you can be doing for service. Also, there's enrichment. Lisa mentioned some traditional residential summer programs have cut their prices. There are a lot of great classes offered between on sites like Coursera and edX. You could do a passion project, like build a tree house, or repair a car, or watch all classic films with your family. There's lots of different ways you can explore interests. There are research opportunities online also. Another thing that Lisa brought up was student groups, her a cappella student. Usually student groups end at the end of school, but maybe this summer, because people are used to this virtual environment, you can continue your student newspaper during the summer. You can continue your a cappella concerts during the summer, things like that. Also sports organizations, you might not be playing, but there are ways to engage with your team. You can do group workouts. You can do a group community service project with your sports team. And the last thing I'll talk about is politics. This is a big year for politics. All of these campaigns and political officials' offices are still going full blast. So there will be great opportunities for all of that. So those are some of our ideas. There were, 30 questions about what should I do this summer. So I wanted to cover that. But Victor or Claudia, do you have any thoughts about what you'll be looking for from students in the summer?
Yeah, thank you for bringing up all of those different examples, because I think they're so important for students to recognize and families to recognize that we're not looking for anything that's catered, and you don't have to go out and spend huge amounts of money on an experience. And I think, again, in the spirit of trying to be positive and take what this entire spring has been into an opportunity, this is allowing people to redefine expectations, and that the activities you may have done, they may not be happening. It doesn't mean that yes, you can grieve them. I think everyone is grieving the loss of things that we're familiar with, but it also kind of takes this weight off of your shoulder that, all right, I don't have to do this thing that I thought I had planned and it was what I should do to get to college, but that it's giving you the opportunity to be creative, as you said, Abby, do a passion project. And it doesn't have to be a thing that's going to change, the world or even your community, because I think that's one of the myths about college admissions, is that it all has to be serving someone else or like having some big impact, when the little things matter just as much. And I remember reading tons of articles at the start of remote learning where families were concerned that students weren't going to be learning, but there's all these other things you can be doing in your home. How to be self-sufficient when you finally do go off to a college experience. If you're a student whose parents have done a lot for you, you're incredibly lucky, but you're going to be stepping outside of your home in a few months and being able to cook a meal for yourself or for someone else to express gratitude. Like, that's really important too. So thinking about those things that, we all have bucket lists of items that if we had more time, what would we do? And sometimes that means just reading a lot of really good books. Like, you don't have to really be on this like rat race to have something big and impressive to show, but what haven't you been able to do that might really be meaningful, that you can gain something from that experience? And even, again, if you're limited by finances or health reasons, just to think about, again, how to find meaning in the simplest things. And sometimes that is reading a good book, cooking for someone, writing letters to folks who are working incredibly hard and putting their lives on the line for all of us. Like, that is a meaningful summer that doesn't necessarily require you to travel or take a course or pay for something, but it's what you make out of it, I think.
Yeah, those are all such great thoughts, and I have two lines of thinking here. The first is I want to encourage you, students. I see a couple questions about how do you demonstrate growth mindset? How do colleges measure it? We don't have a measurement for it, and it's not something that I am going to encourage you necessarily to try to demonstrate, but try to recognize when you are in a moment when you are using growth mindset, right? Not try to do something to demonstrate it for a college application, but recognize that when you are, you are trying to learn that, that song on the guitar again after putting down the guitar for 5 years, you are kind of bringing this back, and the more you are kind of it's building a consciousness around that. It's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever had the experience of getting a new car and realize like you've never seen the car before, and then all of a sudden once you buy it, you see that car all over the place. I think that that's kind of how I think about growth mindset, is that like once you start recognizing that it is part of your existence and your operation, you will be fulfilled from it, not trying to demonstrate it for X, Y, or Z reason. The other point I want to make is that, and there was a question about like using the Common Application is going to offer students the space to talk about how the COVID-19 pandemic affected them, and I encourage you to utilize that space however you want to. I think that we are not having any expectations with that. What I think people do forget about is that college admissions offices have always had to consider this context. It might not be the context of a pandemic, but there are very different circumstances that students from across the country and frankly the world are experiencing that we have to understand when we are reading their applications and getting to know them as students, right? And the same goes for, you know, a lot of students are like, how can you operate without not having campus visitors? Or how can I make this decision without visiting campus? There are many international students who have always had to be learning about our US universities online and virtually. And so just keep in mind that this idea of understanding the context from where you're coming, and whatever that context might be in this coming cycle, it's not a new skill for us in college admissions offices.
Well, that was a great way to end it. And I will say that I actually went to my college. I never saw it before I went. So I never did. Perhaps that's why I got into this business, so that I could help people. I remember my dad took pictures and he said, this is what it looks like. And that was kind of it. So on that note, I just want to thank all of our panelists for coming, and all of our listeners. This was a really wonderful, wonderful discussion. And I hope you all guys all learned as much as I did about it. We do have online resources for summer activities, which we will send to all of the families that registered. So thank you guys so much.